the summer of 1997, deep beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, something happened that science could not explain. A sound was recorded. Not just any sound, the loudest, most powerful, most mysterious underwater sound ever captured by human technology. It traveled over 3,000 miles in every direction. It rattled sensors that were never designed to detect anything like it. Scientists who heard the playback went quiet, and for the next 15 years, nobody could tell you what made it. This is the story of the bloop, and the truth, when it finally came, was stranger than almost anyone expected. Welcome to Benthic Files. If you love the deep ocean, if you love real mysteries that sit right at the edge of what science can explain, then this channel was made for you. Hit subscribe right now, drop a like on this video, and before we go any further, tell us in the comments, do you think the ocean still holds creatures we haven't discovered yet? Because that question is going to matter a lot by the end of this story. Now, let's go back to the beginning. It is 1997. The Cold War is technically over, but the ocean is still full of secrets from it. Decades earlier, the United States military had quietly built one of the most extraordinary surveillance systems in human history. They called it SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System. Arrays of hydrophones were placed on the ocean bottom and connected by underwater cables to processing centers located on shore. The original purpose was simple and terrifying: track Soviet submarines. These underwater microphones were so sensitive they could pick up the low hum of an enemy vessel moving silently beneath the waves, thousands of miles away. The Cold War ended, but the microphones kept listening. By the 1990s, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, had taken over a network of these hydrophones and repurposed them for science. Researchers used them to listen for underwater volcanic activity in the southern Pacific. These were not small, basic recording devices. This was the Equatorial Pacific Ocean Autonomous Hydrophone Array, a system of hydrophones primarily used to monitor undersea seismicity, ice noise, and marine mammal population and migration. In other words, NOAA was using military-grade Cold War listening technology to study the natural sounds of the deep sea. Earthquakes, volcanoes, whale calls, the low, constant groan of the planet itself. What they were not expecting was something that didn't fit into any of those categories. In the summer of 1997, something triggered the entire network. The sound was picked up by hydrophones located over 5,000 kilometers apart in the Pacific Ocean. Let that sink in for a moment. 5,000 kilometers. That is roughly the distance from Los Angeles to London. The same single sound picked up at both ends of that range at the same moment. The bloop was one of the loudest underwater sounds ever recorded. Hydrophones more than 3,000 miles apart all captured the same noise. And yet there was no explosion on record, no military exercise, no earthquake logged. Just this sound, rising up from somewhere in the deep South Pacific and then falling silent. The scientists who first analyzed the recording were immediately struck by something unusual. According to the NOAA description, the bloop rose rapidly in frequency over about 1 minute. That detail matters more than it might seem. Rising frequency over time is a characteristic feature of biological sounds. It is the kind of pattern you see in whale calls, in animal vocalizations, in living things that produce sound intentionally. The data looked organic, it looked alive. And that is when things got truly interesting. NOAA Christopher Fox stated that while the audio profile of the bloop does resemble that of a living creature, the source was a mystery, because it would be far more powerful than the calls made by any animal on Earth. Read that sentence again. Far more powerful than the calls made by any animal on Earth. The blue whale is the loudest animal known to science. Its calls can reach around 188 decibels underwater and travel hundreds of miles. The blue whale is also the largest animal that has ever lived on this planet, as far as we know. And the bloop, whatever made it, would have needed to dwarf even the blue whale in terms of the sheer energy it was putting out. If the bloop had come from an animal, it would have been larger than any blue whale ever recorded. Not slightly larger, significantly larger, larger than anything in the fossil record, larger than anything anyone had ever seen. This is the moment where the internet, when it eventually found out about the bloop, completely lost its mind. The recording was not immediately released to the public in 1997, but over the following years, as NOAA published research and journalists began picking up the story, the bloop became one of the most discussed ocean mysteries of the early internet era. Forums lit up, science blogs ran with it. Cryptozoology websites published long, breathless articles asking whether this could be evidence of a sea creature so massive it had never once surfaced in recorded human history. Some people pointed to the work of horror writer H.P. Lovecraft, who had set one of his most famous fictional stories in the South Pacific, the same general region where the bloop was recorded. The bloop seemed to originate near Point Nemo, the most remote location on Earth, a place known as the oceanic pole of inaccessibility, far from land, people, and human interference. In fiction, it is eerily close to where Lovecraft placed the lost city of Arlae, home of the mythic sea god Cthulhu. Coincidence? Almost certainly. But the timing and the location fed something deep in the human imagination. And here is the thing that kept serious scientists up at night, not just internet theorists. The ocean is not well understood, not even close. With about 95% of the ocean unexplored, theories abounded. 95%. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of our own ocean floor. The deep sea is the largest ecosystem on Earth, and we have barely scratched the surface of what lives in it. Every year, scientists discover new species in the deep, creatures that glow, creatures that produce their own light, creatures that survive in conditions that would kill almost anything else. So the idea that something very large and very unknown could be out there, singing in the darkness, was not entirely as crazy as it sounded. But science does not run on feeling, it runs on evidence. And the scientists at NOAA Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory did not stop working just because they had run out of obvious answers. Here is something that very few people who talk about the bloop ever explain properly. The reason a sound can travel 3,000 miles underwater is not magic, it is physics. And understanding it changes everything about how you think about this mystery. Deep in the ocean, at around 1,000 meters below the surface, there exists what scientists call the SOFAR channel. SOFAR stands for air sound fixing and ranging. It is a zone of minimum sound speed in the oceans that occurs at depths of approximately 1,000 meters. In this region, pressure, temperature, and salinity combine to create a layer where sound becomes trapped by refraction, dispersed horizontally rather than in 3 directions, and is able to travel slowly over great distances. Think of it like a natural acoustic highway buried in the ocean. Sound waves in this channel are continually refracted back towards its center, trapped as if in a fiber optic cable. A sound generated in the SOFAR channel does not spread out in all directions and fade away. It travels horizontally, efficiently, for enormous distances, losing very little energy along the way. This was actually discovered during World War II, when military scientists realized it could be used to track submarines and even locate downed pilots at sea. Arrays of hydrophones connected to processing centers on shore were used to detect and track the movement of submarines across entire ocean basins. The same channel that carried whale songs across the Pacific, the same channel that carried enemy submarine signatures to American listening posts. And in 1997, it carried something else entirely, something that hit every sensor in the network and left no name attached to it. The bloop was detected multiple times over the course of that summer. It was not a one-time glitch. It was not a burst of random interference. It came back. It was consistent. And every time it appeared in the data, it had the same rising frequency signature, the same enormous amplitude, and the same approximate point of origin, a remote stretch of the South Pacific, at 50 degrees south latitude, 100 degrees west longitude, a remote area west of Chile, with no record of unusual human or animal activity. The years passed, NOAA kept listening, and slowly something began to change in the data. As the years passed, researchers continued to deploy hydrophones ever closer to Antarctica, in an ongoing effort to study the sounds of seafloor volcanoes and earthquakes. And as those new hydrophones came online, something interesting happened. They started picking up sounds in the icy waters near Antarctica that had a strangely familiar acoustic signature, not identical to the bloop, but close, very close. The NOAA Events program found that numerous ice quakes share similar spectrograms with the bloop, as well as the amplitude necessary to detect them, despite ranges exceeding 5,000 kilometers. This was found during the tracking of iceberg A53A as it disintegrated near South Georgia Island in early 2008. An icequake is not a small event. When a massive glacier fractures, when a billion tons of ice suddenly cracks and shifts and breaks free from the land that has held it for centuries, it releases energy on a seismic scale. And that energy, channeled through cold polar water and amplified by the SOSUS system, can travel extraordinary distances. In 2012, oceanographer Robert Dziak and his team made it official. The mysterious bloop sound had been caused by the collapse of a massive block of ice in the South Pacific, near Antarctica. An icequake. Case closed, the headline said. Mystery solved. Move on. But here is where Benthic Files needs to be honest with you, because the real story is more complicated than a clean headline. Yes, NOAA official position is that the bloop was an icequake, a glacial calving event of enormous scale. The scientific consensus has moved in that direction, and the acoustic evidence linking the bloop to Antarctic ice events is genuinely compelling. The rising frequency pattern, once thought to be unique to biological sounds, has since been observed in large-scale ice fracture events. In ice calving, variations result from a sound source's motion. Icequakes, caused by the fracturing and movement of large ice masses, can produce powerful low-frequency sounds that propagate over vast distances in water. But here is the question that lingers, and the one that scientists have not fully put to bed. The bloop was not just similar to known icequake recordings. The bloop was far louder than any recorded icequake. The scale of the event, whatever it was, exceeded anything that had been documented before or since, and the bloop has never been heard again. Not in the same form, not with the same intensity, not from the same location. Since its initial detection in 1997, the bloop has not been heard again. Despite numerous attempts to locate the source of the sound, scientists have been unable to determine its precise origin. Think about what that means. If this was an icequake, it was the largest and loudest glacial fracture event ever recorded in scientific history. An event so powerful, it blanketed the entire Pacific with sound, and then never repeated itself. Something broke, something enormous. Somewhere in the cold, dark water near Antarctica, shattered in a way it had never shattered before, and it has been quiet ever since. And there is one more layer to this story that almost nobody talks about. The bloop happened in 1997. Climate scientists have been tracking the accelerating loss of Antarctic ice for decades. The same forces that are reshaping the frozen southern continent today, warming ocean temperatures, shifting currents, the slow collapse of ice shelves that have existed for millennia were already at work in 1997. As the coast of Antarctica shifts, more iceberg cracking events may occur, generating ocean sounds similar to the bloop. In other words, the bloop may not just be an acoustic mystery. It may be one of the earliest, loudest signals of something much larger happening to the planet, a warning written not in temperature records or satellite images, but in sound, in the language of the deep ocean itself. The hydrophones that were built to listen for Soviet submarines ended up listening for something far older and far more powerful than any human weapon. They ended up capturing the sound of a dying continent of ice. There is something profound about that. The same technology born from human conflict, designed to track the movements of war machines, ended up giving us one of the clearest windows we have ever had into the natural forces reshaping the Earth. The ocean does not care about our politics. It does not care about our theories or our internet forums or our horror stories. It just keeps moving. It keeps groaning. It keeps producing sounds that travel thousands of miles in the dark, sounds that carry information we are only just beginning to know how to read. Now here is what we want to leave you with. The bloop is officially explained. but officially explained and fully understood are not the same thing. The ocean covers more than 70% of this planet. We have mapped less than a quarter of the seafloor in any real detail. New species are being discovered in the deep every single year. The creatures that live down there in the crushing pressure, in the permanent cold darkness, feeding off the thin chemical energy of hydrothermal vents, are so different from anything we know at the surface that they might as well be from another planet. The bloop was probably ice. But the ocean's capacity to surprise us has not gone anywhere. If you found this video as fascinating as we did building it, share it with someone who loves a good deep ocean mystery. These stories deserve to be heard by more people. And if you want to keep exploring the strangest, most unexplained corners of the deep sea with us, subscribe to Benthic Files and turn on notifications, because the next story we are working on goes even deeper than this one, and you are not going to want to miss it. So here is our question for you. Now that you know the real science behind the bloop, does the explanation satisfy you? Or does part of you still believe there is something down there, something enormous and undiscovered, waiting in the dark water? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. And whatever you believe, the ocean is listening.